Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jason, and today we're going to start the grueling and arduous process
of ruining my set of valve covers for Project Black Pearl. That's my 2002 540.
6-speed. Now, I say that kind of in jest. I don't plan to ruin these. I really hope I don't ruin these. I bought these at a junkyard here locally, a pick and pull, as well as this left side or passenger side timing cover. There's a funny looking bolt in my valve cover to timing cover on the car, and I have a distinct impression that the threads are completely jacked. So when I was at the junkyard and I found these covers, I picked this guy up. What I'm planning to do is powder coat, just like this, to a satin or matte black to hopefully better match or emulate what's seen on my M5 or my S62 engine. I did this piece this morning and I'm actually pretty happy with it. This is only the third thing that I've powder coated. I powder coated a rear main seal just because the housing and a tow hook just to test it. Jumping right into our covers here, let's talk about the covers metallurgy just a little bit. These covers were part of BMW's Efficient Dynamics back in the 90s and early 2000s. And the reason that I say that is because they decided to make them out of magnesium, make them as lightweight as possible, as well as both rigid and strong. The problem with that is where magnesium falls on the periodic table often has it turning into an anode in relation to all the other metals around it. And it's also porous, being a cast finish. So what winds up happening is the factory coating pretty quickly right out of the gate, and I can recall this from working on these cars when they were brand new, started chipping. And the real problem with it chipping is inside of the sealing groove, when that paint or powder coat or whatever the original finish was started to chip out of that groove, the seal would no longer seal. The oil would go right through that chipped area and right on out, and you'd get a perpetual oil leak. No matter how many times you change the valve cover gaskets, you're gonna wind up getting some sort of seeping or problematic leakage. And I believe that's what's happening on the 540 now. It smells like a grease fire going down the road, oil coming from everywhere. So that'll be part of a bigger job and a reseal, and this will be more the beautification. These covers are coated on both the inside and the outside, whereas if they were aluminum, they would not be coated on the inside. The reason, like I said, that they're coated on the inside is because if they're exposed to moisture, to oil, to the air, for prolonged periods of time, they're going to corrode, oxidize, and eventually fall apart. So what you'll find is on a lot of these cars that weren't very well taken care of, the covers may have perforated all the way through, or you'll find really, really heavy bubbling on the top side where oil is really just seeped into everywhere. You're never gonna get those to seal. If you look at like the E90 generation S65 engine or the M3 engine, they had magnesium covers from the factory as well, which were also problematic. BMW later updated those to an aluminum cover, much more like what's found on the S85 V10. I'm not sure if the new covers that BMW sells for the M62 engine are aluminum or magnesium. What I am sure of is they are well outside of my budget. I bought these for under $100, pulled off of a pick and park car at the junkyard, and I think that I'll be able to salvage them. At the very least, if I can't salvage these, I'll have learned something to try to do the same thing on the ones on the car, or I'll go to another junkyard and I'll try to find another used set. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna start by just cleaning them. I'm gonna put them in my sink in the corner over here. I'm gonna put some degreaser on there and I'm gonna scrub like and then we're gonna see what we can do about getting some of the paint off. And to do that, we're gonna go through multiple steps. I'm gonna try some paint stripper and some aircraft style stripper. I'll try some TSP, so some phosphate cleaner. And then I'm going to outgas these and bake them, get them dry and into my sandblasting cabinet. Then we'll clean them again and then we'll outgas them again. Outgassing is gonna become vitally important to getting a good finish on these, because any oil that is stuck down in the substrate is gonna come out when we go to coat them, paint them, or do anything else. I'm also going to be zinc primering the outside and the inside of these to try to give us the best corrosion prevention, and then I will just be color coding the outside. We're gonna start by just disassembling what we do have here. This rubber seal here is our coil cover. When you look inside here, you can see all of the powder coat or paint that's stuck to it. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get all that off, but we'll try. Wow. Yeah, it's all just peeling right off of there. Gross. One thing that you'll find with these valve covers is that when they have been installed for a while, you'll run into this issue where the rubber grommets will basically impregnate themselves or into the cover, and they become very difficult to get off. And they also leak because the seal isn't making a seal with all that chipping paint. Wow, these things have been on here for a while. These gaskets are uber compressed. A lot of people will wind up over torquing these, thinking that by torquing it down tighter, you're going to get a better seal, but you're not going to be able to seal through all of this chipped out paint material. Yeah, the paint is just wiping out of here. This is just a plastic brush. Well, after both Judah and I scrubbed on this thing for a while, the inside's looking much better. But I got this new ultrasonic cleaner and I figure,
Half of it will fit in there. Let's see how it works.
so I've got the water, it's up to 40 degrees right now, Celsius. But we're just gonna drop this bad boy in here. A third of the way in, almost halfway. Run a 10-minute cycle, see what happens. Well, there's certainly a lot of oil debris down inside that tank. It's looking a lot better. There's still quite a bit of stuff I think we're gonna have to brush in here. Even the sticker on the back is starting to loosen up finally. Oh yeah, a bunch of metal coming out here.
Like magnesium?
Yeah, like you can see the groove. It's a little worn. Well, after putting this through the ultrasonic and scraping and scrubbing and doing all sorts of stuff to it, I gave it a quick pre-bake at 350 and the inside is starting to look pretty good. The outside, a lot of this paint is coming off with just air, but also much of it is still pretty well adhered. So I'm going to try inside of the coil cover area with some chemical stripper first before I go straight to the sandblast cabinet, because this is a big piece in my little sandblast cabinet. Here goes nothing. I don't know where the stripper came from. It was left here when I moved in, so it says use after 6 months. It's been 3 years. I don't know how old it was when we got here. We'll see if it still works. Valve cover's still a little warm. It's probably like 90 degrees. Yeah, it's only 82 in here today though. I got the swamp cooler going bright and early. It's a strong smell. I've got 2 fans running. One right here next to me and one right there at the door. Okay, I'll let that sit for 15 minutes and come back and see if any of this paint scrapes off. And it's sticking pretty good. Well, this stripper doesn't seem to be all that effective on here. It is working, but it's going to be a lot of labor to chemically strip this whole valve cover. So I won't make you watch that whole thing. I'm going to play with it for a little while and see if I can't perfect this process a little bit more. After coating this whole center section twice, the paint got a little gummy, but it didn't really want to come off. And so what we did was we rinsed it down, baked it real quick to dry it off, put it in my sandblaster. You can see we started to get down to some raw metal under here. The base coat is pretty darn strong on this stuff. And I don't have an air compressor big enough to blast this thing in entirety, which means I'm back to the stripper.
And
Yeah, so we're gonna coat this whole thing, give it a shot again, probably multiple times, and keep going. Guess we're all learning together on this one.
So one of the things that I learned through this process was that this chemical stripper was drying out in the heat of my garage. By the time we got to this stage, we were probably 85 to 90 degrees at 15% humidity. So it just turned everything into gum. What was working the best is keeping it wet. Water helped to get everything to strip off. I know in the professional shops, they dunk in a tank and then pressure wash and whatnot. For me, adding a little bit of water really did make a big difference. Then we moved on to the sandblaster once we got down to that base coat, and we're able to get this thing pretty well taken care of in there.
Well, after many hours of attempting to use the chemical stripper we did make some progress. And then many more hours in the Sandblaster, and subsequently just as much more time with some 320 grit and a sanding block, we've gotten the valve cover to this stage. I've already pre-baked it once at 450. Our actual cure temp for the powder we're going to be using is 375 for the primer and 400 for the top coat. The pre-bake is probably the most important thing, and here's why. Just with this one baking cycle, I got oil out here, and I got oil out here, and oil came out here. Why is that? Well, that's because these castings suck. So there's oil and debris stuck in all of these little grooves. I have been using a Dremel with a brass brush, my Dremel with some actual cutting burrs, and I've been smoothing everything out the best I can. And I think that today I'm probably going to be putting primer and top coat on this thing. The primer is going to help seal this magnesium, so hopefully we don't run into quite as bad a problem as the original finish. Now, do I expect that it'll be perfect? No. These castings are terrible. Do I expect that it's going to be much better? Yes. And like I said earlier, I'm really hoping not to ruin these things. So what I'm planning to do now is to basically touch every other corner of this thing again. We're going to clean it with some degreaser, then we're going to bake it one more time at 450. And in my oven, I noticed that the front of the oven, I'm sure with most, is a little cooler than the back. So I'm doing 450, rotating it, and then 450, 20 minutes each. So the back of the oven and the front of the oven gets, well, the part in the oven gets equal heat distribution. Time to rotate. Ooh, there's oil coming up out of this stud location. It's climbing right up the threads. So I baked this again for, I don't know, an hour and a half yesterday at 450, and I only got one little spot with a little color of oil that came out. And I've got this all set up now for our first coat of primer. I've got it set up on this rack. You can see I made these little standoffs so that I can unclip my ground and I can flip it over the other direction. I also set it up like this so that I can install it in the oven upside down so that it's going to be suspended in the middle, the furthest away from the bottom rack, which is where most of the heat comes from. I don't want to over bake it by having it suspended, and I couldn't figure out any other way to hang it in my little oven. I've also added a 10 gauge ground directly to my house ground. So hopefully this is going to help with all of the different Faraday areas on this thing, because this manifold, or this valve cover, is basically one giant Faraday cage with all these little nooks and crannies everywhere. I don't really know. This is only the fourth thing I've ever powder coated, and certainly the most intricate. I added another gauge onto my gun so that I can regulate it down. I'm going to start at 8 psi, see how that goes, and then I can adjust it more easily here than over there at my compressor. I suppose now it's time for the real thing to happen. Let's get some powder in here. I have no idea how much this is going to take. We'll start with that. You see my box fan air cleaner back there. We'll see how double box fans work. I'm going to start with trying to get the inside because it's got some complex areas.
So like I said, this is the most complicated thing thus far that I've tried to powder coat. And it really did show here because for some reason we couldn't get the powder to stick. We're not sure if the bolt was making a good ground. I probably should have checked it with a meter, but eventually what we did was we moved our ground over to the bung on the side of the cover, and it started to work pretty good. We were still experiencing quite a bit of Faraday all over this thing, on the top, on the bottom, inside, basically all over. And we're having trouble to get it dropping down into the grooves and into the channels.
It is going on.
It was going on though, like I said there. And we were starting to discuss at this point, should we put a second coat?
It doesn't want to drop into the grooves.
Should we try to hot flock it? We really didn't know what to do because, well, we've never done this before. At least not this complicated. So we decided, let's get one coat on here, at least the best we can. We'll throw it in the oven, we'll flash it, and we'll see how it comes out the other side. Then we can decide if we're going to put a second coat on.
Maybe we should have shortened this place a little bit.
It's pretty close to the middle.
At this stage, I was super impressed. I didn't expect the coverage that we had on our first coat, but with that, we had a few blank spots and some thin coverage that we could see with a light. We made the decision to let it cool down to about 150, 160 degrees and get going on a second coat. This second coat stuck really, really well. We were able to get good coverage on the whole thing and then get that ready and back into the oven. This isn't hot flocking at this stage. None of the powder is flowing out. This is just, I guess, spraying at a little bit warmer temp. You can see I'm really shaking up the bottle there. I'm getting down to the bottom of the bottle, and what I found was the fluidizing inside this PCS 250 is not that great. A secondary fluidizer or something of that nature would probably work better, but it was getting the job done. I'm pretty impressed for the price, the quality of this PCS 250, this Eastwood gun setup, and honestly, I'm really happy with how this thing has come to this point. We tried with the conical nozzle, without it. I guess it's not a conical, it's just a deflector, and then got that bad boy in the oven.
Once the part reaches 400.
This was certainly a holy moly moment. Man, did I like the way this looked. I was giddy pulling this thing out.
Well, it's out of the oven. Let's go ahead and take it off of our little cage setup here. I think it looks pretty good, actually, for my first time with a part this complicated. And for what amounted to 3 coats, there are just a couple of spots that I think could have gotten more powder. From what I'm looking at, this is more than good to go on the car, and gosh, do I like this finish. It does look really nice. There are still quite a few casting flaws that I knew I wasn't gonna get rid of by filling them in with paint. Even the inside, I actually kind of really like the way that looks with a little bit of the top coat on the primer inside, and because it's baked on, I don't have any concerns about it coming off, and it really did a good job flowing in all over the place in here. This is gonna work nicely. We need to take that other one and do it all again, but this time, I don't have it out here. I bought a can of aircraft stripper that's in the house because it's way too hot to leave that stuff out here in the shop. Really excited to see how this next one comes out, knowing what I've learned here, having the bigger air compressor. This is gonna be good.
Learning from our mistakes with the first cover, we decided to use a bit more moisture and wrap it. That helped, but it still was drying out. So adding some water to our mix with our stripper, since we're not dunking these things, really did make a big difference. Keeping everything lubricated and moist helped to get that paint right off of there and ready for the sandblaster. Judah wound up doing like 90% of the sandblasting on this one because he really likes it, and so I thought, why not? He can do it. While I was working on other things. On this other cover, we were able to learn from our mistakes. So we put 1 coat of primer on there, we double checked our ground using a multimeter, got it in the oven, flashed it, got a second coat of primer on there. The second coat went on really well. And then we got our black on. We did 1 coat of black, flash, and then a really light top coat to fill in all the little imperfections that we missed the first time.
So what did we learn through all of this? It's pretty clear you can powder coat at home. Do I know what I'm doing? Not a clue. But that's kind of the joy of DIY and trying to figure things out on your own. This piece being aluminum, it was a lot easier because I could just tape off one side. These ones being magnesium, we had to take care of the inside and get them nice, both inside and outside, or more importantly, protected. One of the little things that I went ahead and did along the way was, you can see here, this is the visible side of the top of the valve cover that's not covered by the coil covers. I really didn't like the way that it looked with the bare nut on the top and washer. So Judah and I made a little plate so that we could powder coat the washers and the nuts. And now I have 8 of these, so I have the 4 visible sections powder coated, and then I have the inside. I'm not gonna worry about the powder coat there, mainly because the rest of the ones are on the car. These were just spares that I got from the junkyard. Now, the whole outside will be done in the same satin black powder coat, except our front 3 bolts. These are the bolts that are on the car. These things are expensive, so I don't have spares lying around. When I take the valve covers off of the car, I'm gonna go ahead and clean those up. I'll cut the washers off, not the washers, I'll cut the grommets off, and then I'll powder coat those separately so that all of it matches and it's all gonna be super nice. I may even go to the effort of powder coating the ends of all of my timing cover bolts as well. That way, it's a nice clean install. I really don't know about the timing cover though. I might just leave that. This was a super fun project. I got to learn a whole bunch of stuff. It forced the purchase of a bigger compressor. Forced, I don't know. I've wanted one for a long time and this just seemed like the right time to do it. So I'm probably gonna sell my little compressor, try to recoup some of the costs versus use it as an auxiliary tank, which is something I really wanna do. You'll see. We got a video coming out on the compressor getting all hooked up and installed, and then I'm building an aftercooler for it. Take a look at my merch down below, buy a shirt, buy a hat, a sticker, something like that. If you can, that would be super helpful. If you hit that like and subscribe button, let me know down in the comments what you liked about the video, what you didn't like. Are these gonna fall apart? Am I completely wrong in how I did this? Again, I have no clue what I'm doing. This is just me working at home. This is something you can do and you probably can do better than me with experience. Thanks again for watching. I really enjoyed having you. We'll see you on the next one.